Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host this week, Mary Barthelson. Tonight we are joined by Congressman Gerry Connolly. Congressman Connolly has been representing the 11th Congressional District of Virginia since 2008, winning a seat that had been held by a Republican for over a decade. He is serving his 7th term and is a senior member of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, where he chairs the Subcommittee on Governmental Operations. Congressman Connolly, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Pleasure.
I appreciate you fitting us into your busy schedule. I know there's always a lot going on. Whenever I first interview someone, I like to do a deep dive into their background for a couple of reasons. It helps our audience get to know our guests a little better, for those who are not familiar. And it also is good for our younger audience to learn from different people's life paths as they plan for their future. So I wanted to start our conversation today at the beginning. And I know that although you've served in Fairfax for a long time, this isn't originally where you grew up. So can you tell us about where you grew up?
I grew up an Irish Catholic kid in Boston, and actually wanted to be a priest and studied to be a priest for 6 years. But I was really taken by one of the most powerful forces that was occurring at that time was Vatican II, which was led by Pope John the 23rd, who was really the last progressive pope until the current pope, Pope Francis. And I really was attracted to the reforms and the what he called aggiornamento, open the windows of the Catholic Church. And so I always kind of had a progressive bent, even as a young student in Boston.
And what did your parents do?
My mother was a nurse for 45 years, and my dad was an insurance salesman.
And so what was your childhood like in Boston?
We were lower middle class, those things we couldn't afford, but we did own our house. I went to Catholic school. Every school I went to until I went to graduate school actually was a Catholic private school. In those days, particularly in Boston, that was considered a better education than going to the public schools in Boston. And I had the fortune or misfortune, we bought a house directly across the street from both the school and the church. So as an altar boy, anytime they needed a new altar boy because somebody got sick or something, we got called, and across the street we went. So it was a very Catholic, Irish Catholic culture, and kind of insulated in that sense. But lots was going on around us, and I got very involved later when I went to the seminary, actually, in the anti-war movement and in the civil rights movement.
Can you tell me who in your family came from Ireland? So I don't have Irish ancestors, I have Scottish ancestors, so I think our ancestors were neighbors, but I'm curious to hear.
We're fellow Celts.
Yes.
Yeah, my grandmother, my mother's mother, emigrated from Ireland. She was 18 years old. She had no skills. She had an 8th grade education. She could sew, and she took in wealthy people's laundry. And she saved up every penny. For the rest of her life, from 18 until when she died in her 90s, she kept a day book of every penny that came in and every penny that went out. And by doing that, she was able to actually bring her invalid mother over from Ireland and her brothers, and started a family here. And I think she'd marvel at the fact that 2 generations later, her grandson is a member of the U.S. Congress. And I tell that story a lot because I want people to know that this idea that we only want skilled immigrants coming to the United States, well, my grandmother wouldn't have been allowed in the United States if that were the case. And yet, you know what? Her family did pretty well.
What were some of the life lessons that she taught you?
She was a very loving and generous person, and very caring and giving. She didn't have a lot to give financially or resource-wise, but you know, there was no self-pity, and whatever she had, she was more than willing to share. And I think her generosity of spirit and actual generosity really stuck with me. She was just a loving, caring person.
I know that the civil rights movement started, I believe, in your teen years. Was that around the time that you started to get interested in political issues?
Yes. Yeah. My first memory of being involved in politics at all, not that it was that much of an involvement, but I helped put up signs with my dad, who was what a ward committeeman we would call precinct captain. And he was putting up signs for the re-election of John Kennedy to the U.S. Senate in 1958. And that's my first memory of any political act. I was a young kid, and very young. And then the bug hit me. I would watch state conventions on television, the way other people would watch sports games. You know, I'd watch anything political. And I watched the 1960 convention on television. I watched the 64 convention on television. I really got involved in that one against Goldwater, and always a Democrat. And you know, it was a love because I thought that's the arena in which you can solve problems, get problems addressed. And I was always attracted to that arena.
And what college did you go to? And what
I went to
were
a
you
Catholic
studying?
seminary, Maryknoll Seminary in suburban Chicago, and graduated from there. And I spent 6 years in the seminary. But it was in the seminary that we particularly got involved because the 1968 campaign, I got very involved in the anti-war movement and helping Gene McCarthy in the Wisconsin primary, because that was close enough we could go up there and knock on doors and campaign. And then when Bobby Kennedy got in the race after that, I switched to Bobby Kennedy because I felt he could win and he would end the war. So even then I was thinking strategically and you know, making pragmatic decisions to get to the goal, which was end the war. I was also involved in the civil rights movement. Got involved in young Jesse Jackson. He had formed a thing called Operation Breadbasket in Chicago, and he was trying to help get minority hiring in the bus system and in grocery stores. In particular, that was part of his campaign, and I got involved in that. And I also got involved in draft counseling. So I actually was counseling young men, only young men who were being drafted still, in terms of what their rights were under the Selective Service Act.
So were you still in college when you officially made that switch from religion to politics?
Well, when I graduated, I decided that I was disappointed that the Catholic Church was not as involved in the anti-war movement and in the civil rights movement as other denominations were. And that allowed me to gravitate toward a maybe broader world. I don't know that I felt I was going to run for office, but I certainly was attracted to politics as a means to get things done and solve problems, and in that case, big ones. You know, how do we get the civil rights movement, to be successful? How do we end this horrible war in Southeast Asia? And so I didn't feel I was going to be able to do that through the ministerial route, shall we say.
Yeah, it's I always love hearing about like historical things from people who lived through that, because that's what I learned about in our history class, but you saw it firsthand. So are there any memories that really like stick out to you?
I think I learned fairly young in 1968 with the assassination of Martin Luther King in April, and I was in Chicago, and Chicago had huge riots and big parts of the town were burning, and then we had one big hope left that Bobby Kennedy would win, and I went to bed, when he won the California primary in June, thinking we're going to do it, and then getting woken up in the middle of the night with a call from a friend of mine saying he had been shot. And as a young person, having all that hope evaporate, what do you hold on to? What do you do? And I guess I had to learn, you know, you can't put your hopes in heroes. You know, you've got to have a core belief and values that sustain you even when people you look up to or that are models aren't able to continue to carry the banner. You've got to be able to carry the banner.
Is that what inspired you to enroll at Harvard?
I had come to Washington and worked for a couple of international nonprofits in refugees and world hunger. And I did that for 10 years and then decided I needed to get my mid-career master's, and I went to the Kennedy School at Harvard and got my MPA, and then came back here to pursue foreign policy, actually, and politics, that mix. And I was very fortunate to land a job in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee with Joseph R. Biden Jr., a young senator from Delaware.
I know that social justice issues are really important to young people these days. So is there any advice that you have for them based on your own experience living through that?
Social justice is important to me too, because I mentioned Vatican II. So it's the social justice message of Catholicism that really was instilled in me and that inspires me to this day. A lot of other things have gotten in the way that were never primary issues for Catholics in the past, and I think have maybe damaged our understanding of what it means to let a light shine, if you will, from a spiritual point of view. But I believe that you've got to be confident in your values, and you've got to be a little bit pragmatic. Don't make perfect be the enemy of the good, and don't make it about yourself. Make sure you're focused on the goals, right? So sometimes we want to feel good about ourselves. We feel pure, even if what we're doing is totally ineffectual or counterproductive even, but I feel pretty good about myself. Well, that's very narcissistic and unproductive. So try to keep the ball in play by focusing on others.
I've started getting involved with the grassroots organizing the last couple of years on issues that I care about. And it definitely is a learning experience, so thank you for sharing that with us. We're about to go to break, and I want to talk to you more when we're back. We will be right back with more from Congressman Connolly after the break.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
I was afraid of that.
Well, guess it's time to get you fixed.
Your pets will start fooling around sooner than you think.
Go on, get out of here!
Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
Food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy, and refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodsafety.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host this week, Mary Barthelson. Our guest tonight is Congressman Connolly. Thank you again for joining us. Before the break, we were talking about your childhood and growing up and your college years. I want to talk about your post-college years, and you started getting involved in politics. So can you talk about your early political career?
Sure. I actually got involved in elective politics through a strange route. So I worked in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I thought for sure that maybe I could run for Congress being an important committee staffer, and boy, did I get a lesson that's not how you generally get elected in politics. Everything flows from local empowerment and involvement. And I happen to be civic association president for my local civic association, and we discovered oil, not in a good way, underground pollutant, oil plume that really threw our neighborhood into a tizzy and damaged home values. Health issues arose in terms of exposure to carcinogens like benzene, and trying to get cleanup. And I learned the only level of government I could rely on was local government here in Fairfax County. And that was a real object lesson, right? So EPA wasn't being helpful at that time. The state wasn't being particularly helpful, but the local government was phenomenal. And so it kind of got me focused on effectiveness, right? If you got a problem, you want a government that can help you, really, not words, not rhetoric, help you. And we needed help. And so I organized that effort, and ours is a fairly large community, and that was really sort of my trying out, if you will, for politics. So then people said, well, you ought to run. And the first thing that came up was local government. In Providence District on the Board of Supervisors, I thought, local government? My interest is in foreign policy, and national issues, not this. But I'd been involved through the Civic Association and liked it, and I was involved in the Federation. I became president of the Federation of Citizens Associations. So I thought, well, what the heck, I'm going to run. And hopefully I'll be good at it and like it. And if it doesn't work out, I'll move on. And I loved it. I spent 14 years in local government. I thought it was the best level of government, and still do. You could get all kinds of things done. You could solve all kinds of problems. And you could see the fruit of your labor, and you could reach out and touch real people, trying to help them solve real problems. And I just thought that level of accountability and responsibility and opportunity to do something was phenomenal, and I still do. And I loved every minute of it. And it was that experience that then ultimately led to me running for Congress. Because by that point, I'd been chairman of the county, and everyone thought, well, you're obviously ready to run for Congress. And part of me really hated giving up being chairman, because it was so wonderful, and we got a very aggressive agenda, and we got things done. I started, a big, huge affordable housing initiative. I wrote the first comprehensive environmental plan for the county. We had a gang initiative. We had big transit. I championed the Silver Line, and really proud to work with others to get that done. So we got some big things done, and we got some little things done that mattered to neighborhoods and people. So that's what ultimately allowed me to run for Congress.
So you mentioned some of your highlights being affordable housing and some transportation successes. What was one of the biggest challenges, or some of the biggest challenges that you had to deal with while you were supervisor?
Well, everything was a challenge. I think maybe one of the biggest challenges in local government here in Fairfax is planning and zoning. Representing Providence District on the board, I represented both Merrifield, which was going through a lot of redevelopment, and Mosaic was my plan, and Tyson's. And Tyson's is huge. And we were replanning Tyson's as well in anticipation of the Silver Line. So zoning is very personal real quickly to everybody, right? So if I said, hey, we're going to build, big fat data center that's noisy and kind of smelly right next to your beautiful neighborhood, you're going to have something to say about that. And you're going to wonder, how did the plan and the zoning code allow that? And so, you know, we were constantly dealing with that for the 14 years I was in local government. And so trying to work through those problems and those issues to a fair end that didn't harm people, but that allowed the county to continue to grow responsibly was a daily challenge, and I kind of liked it. I liked that challenge.
Do you think that Fairfax has changed a lot since your time on the board, or? Dramatically.
Well, not just on the board, but since I moved to Fairfax. I mean, when I moved to Fairfax, we were 85% white, 3% foreign born. Today, we're 47% white and 30% foreign born. I mean, just those demographic figures, oh my God, we have changed a lot. And we've changed for the better. Those demographic changes, our crime rate went down. Our median household income went up to the third highest in America. Our high school graduation rate went up. Our high school dropout rate went down. We created 700,000 jobs in that time period. We're now an economic behemoth, you know, attracting people from other parts of the region. When I moved here, we were a commuter county, you know, sending everybody into Washington, you know, to work and then come home at night. So we have radically changed. But I like to tell the story of Fairfax because for people who are afraid of immigration, afraid of change, afraid of the demographic shift, they should come to Fairfax and see how we made it work and work to everyone's betterment.
So that's the Fairfax that I grew up in. It was very diverse. I went to elementary school at Providence Elementary, and we had students from every different country. And for me, I just saw these differences as like you might see a different color hair.
Right.
And these are just different types of Americans. And it was really cool to go with Korean American students down to Williamsburg and on all these cool field trips and learn about our history that we're building together because you know, we all share this nation together. Mm-hmm. So that was like a very unique experience that I didn't realize places throughout the country, you know, they don't get to have that experience. And I didn't realize that until I was an adult. So yeah, thank you for sharing your experience. I'm curious to learn what the issues were when you first ran for Congress.
Congress?
Yes.
When I ran for Congress in 2008, we were in the middle of a recession looking like it could become a depression, big Wall Street crash and a banking crisis. So reforming Wall Street to make sure that taxpayer wasn't on the hook every time something bad happened in Wall Street as opposed to the people who kind of perpetrated it. Also, we talked about healthcare reform and we talked about student loan debt. And we talked about the environment and the need to have some kind of program that would start to reverse global greenhouse gas emissions and reduce CO2 and put us on a better road. And I was proud of the fact that in my first 2 years I voted for every one of those things. And the voters, when I first ran, you know, really were enthusiastic and supportive. 2 years later, they were a lot less so. And even though I had told everybody what I was going to do when I ran in 2008, and that's what they voted for, in 2010, they were in a mood to kind of punish that. And Democrats lost 63 seats in the House, and I almost lost mine.
So we have a couple minutes left. I'm curious to hear what you're working on now and what you think you still have left to accomplish.
Well, right now, I think the biggest thing I do every day is get up and, I don't mean to sound, you know, messianic, but we're fighting for democracy. We're fighting to preserve constitutional democracy in America. Trump and his acolytes are a real threat, and I have seen tragically on Capitol Hill the danger of enabling behavior among Republicans who are enabling everything from, you know, challenging the election results to rationalizing away the violence that occurred on January 6th. And they're almost like a cult. Maybe I should change that. They are a cult. And I think that's a real threat to American democracy. And the plans they have are to essentially establish an authoritarian government. And he's made no secret about that, and they're pushing it. And so the stakes for people like me and people like you, right, as Democrats, as people who want to preserve this democracy, are very, very high this year in a presidential election year, especially this one.
Yeah, January 6th was very scary. I remember watching it on TV, and Virginia police actually responded to that. And I saw people who participated leaving the Capitol with like flags on their trucks, and police were pulling them over. So yeah, it feels like that's like a very big challenge that you have to deal with.
I was on the floor that day. I was on the floor of the House when we had to evacuate the floor and put on gas masks. And I can remember leaving. I didn't want to leave. I was one of the last to leave because I felt it was almost like giving in to them, and I didn't want to do that. And I can remember going out, to the right, and I looked to the left, and I could see the mob at the door, at the glass doors, trying to get in the floor chamber, a House chamber. And it was the kind of memory that you don't forget, and unless you're a Republican member of Congress, apparently. But they experienced the same violence we did, and their lives were just as much at risk as anyone else's, and they were afraid that day. And they've just kind of rationalized it away ever since, which is very dangerous, because that was a seminal experience for all of us as Americans that we never want to repeat.
Yeah, I can't imagine living through that, and also having to balance working with people who were somewhat supportive of that, and also try to get work done and pass legislation. So yeah, thank you for sharing your story with us. That's like gonna be an event that I think we look back on very negatively throughout history, and we need to document it so that we don't forget it, and we make sure it never happens again.
That's right.
So thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your story. As someone who has just started getting involved in local government and politics, it's great to have leaders like you who are basically institutions of Fairfax around. And yeah, I look forward to continuing to see your work and supporting you, and thank you for everything that you do for us. To our audience, make sure to stick around. After the break, we will continue our discussion with our next guest.
Nice going, Spencer! I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See ya, dude. See ya. You remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Hi. Tell him it was an accident, and we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice. Holy smile. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately.
The Inside Scoop.
Are you okay?
Again, your host.
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host this week, Mary Barthelson. We are joined by Dominic Thompson, Executive Director of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Dominic joined FCDC in 2023 after serving as campaign manager for the Democratic nominee in the Indiana State Treasurer's race. He is a graduate from Indiana University with a bachelor's in law and public policy. Dominic, thank you so much for being here with us.
Yes, thank you for having me, Mary. I'm excited to be here.
So how has your first year been on FCDC?
It's been a long year. But during that time period, we've had enormous successes with FCDC. Last year, we made history by winning 49 out of the 50 local and state races on the ballot in Fairfax County. We broke fundraising records. I think it was the 5th highest year for fundraising that we had ever had for FCDC. So, I'm very proud of the work that we've done and the work that we're going to do this year in re-electing President Joe Biden.
So I think I had Brian Graham on to do the post-election recap. What was the one seat that you didn't win? It's shorter to ask what you didn't win than what it is to ask what you won.
That's very true. I will say it haunts me every single night. The one seat that we did not win was the Board of Supervisors seat for Springfield District.
Okay, well, he's an incumbent. He's been there for a very long time, so I feel like it's fair that that we didn't win that one. And that was a happy night for the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Brian was in a very good mood. Can you tell me what it's been like being a young Dem in a leadership role on FCDC?
Yeah, being a young Democrat in such a large role. I mean, you have to think about Fairfax County. We are the same size or bigger than 9 states in the United States. And so being in a leadership role with FCDC has been very rewarding, but also it kind of reminds you that there are not a lot of young Democrats in the field, right? We have a lot of work to do to build our bench and to give young Democrats more experience and more leadership roles throughout our party. So it's been incredibly rewarding. I'm very thankful for that. However, we have a lot more work to do to get more young Democrats involved.
And I believe we have a new chair as well who's a young Dem. Can you talk about that?
We sure do. So back in January, the committee elected Aaron Yohai to be our new FCDC chair. And Aaron, he is 29. Well, he was 29 when he started. Pardon me. 29 when he started. Now he's 30 years old. So he's still very much a young Dem, and he's been doing such a great job. You know how much the FCDC chair does, the Fairfax County Democratic Committee chair does. So he's really come up to speed really well so far.
Yeah, I love seeing the young Dems being involved in running the committee. So for those who are not familiar, can you explain what your role is as executive director of the committee?
Yeah, so within the committee, my role is basically to keep the committee on track to make sure that we're meeting those milestones that we need to meet if we want to, win elections. So whether that is doing the fundraising work that it takes to win in Fairfax County, whether that's, organizing organizing volunteers for day of polling locations to make sure that Democrats have the sample ballot when they walk into their poll booths. Whether that's, just working with our caucuses and our committees to get our message across to voters so they know where we stand as a party. I do all of that, and then a lot of other small tasks. But ultimately the role is to keep the party on the right track and make sure that we are electing Democrats here in Fairfax County, which I'm very proud to say we're doing successfully.
I feel like it's the national political issues that tend to interest people in politics the most, but really the day-to-day stuff that is running everything, it's at the local level. And so I didn't realize how much you guys really do until I got involved, but you guys really keep things running. And local politics is really important, as Congressman Connolly said. So I'm curious, I know that you came from Indiana.
Yes.
Was this your first job that you got after or before leaving Indiana?
Yes, so kind of my history in Indiana was I ran for office as a young Democrat. I ran for county commissioner back home, and unfortunately I lost. It was a close race, but leaving that role, I went on to be the campaign manager for Jessica McClellan, who ran for state treasurer. And so right after leaving that, I came out here to be the executive director for FCDC.
Can you talk a little bit about Indiana politics? Because I'm curious how it compares to Fairfax. Because I mean, we're right next to DC, so I feel like we're like affected a little bit by like federal issues. But what's it like in Indiana?
Well, in Indiana, being a Democrat is kind of a hard thing. So, kind of what happens a lot in the state is there's not a lot of wiggle room. Here in a place like Fairfax County, you have local, state, and federal politics that you can get involved in. In Indiana, that isn't the case, right? Where I lived in Bloomington, Indiana, we didn't have a congressional seat, right? We didn't. Our state house was controlled overwhelmingly by Republicans. So all of the work that you could contribute to and the politics you could contribute to was at a local level. So, it was definitely more crowded, but it put so much importance for Democrats on what we could control locally to make life better for not only us, in the area that we lived, but also to be a safe haven for people who live in a red state. Because, red state politics they're just going so far, they're harming so many people. And so it's these blue safe havens, like Bloomington, which people always call the blueberry in the tomato soup, because it's a small blue dot and surrounded by a lot of red. These local communities become safe havens, really, for people affected by, kind of the radical Republican policies being implemented in the state.
Yeah, that must have been a very different atmosphere growing up there and being in politics, especially there. And I know you weren't successful in your run, but I feel like that was really, really good experience and perspective to bring down to Virginia. And yes, I'm really glad that you brought that experience over. Can you talk about how FCDC works to support Democratic candidates?
Well, looking at the party, I think what people have to realize is that the party provides the infrastructure for candidates to run. I don't know any candidate who would want to recreate the infrastructure every time they ran. If Gerry had to do that, I don't think he would run as many times as he has. And so, the party provides, we provide the volunteers, we provide a lot of the donors, we provide a lot of the infrastructure for day of, getting out the vote, making sure people know who the Democrat is on the ballot. So a lot of work has to get done, and it all happens with these local parties. And they do so much of the heavy lifting to ensure that candidates can get elected, even in Fairfax County.
Yeah, I know, as Congressman Connolly was saying, they have so much to deal with just to govern. But then sometimes it feels like campaigning and actually getting elected, that is almost like a full-time job in and of itself. So I know there's separate staff to deal with both of those because it's really challenging, and you guys are leading that. Can you talk about maybe what's going on in Virginia right now, what you guys are working on? I know there's a governor's race coming up next year, and then we've got a presidential election this year. Are you guys working on anything to support our candidates for those?
Yeah, so, Gerry might be upset if I said this, but we don't have to worry about Gerry losing this year, right, once he gets to the general election. And Don Beyer also doesn't have anything to worry about. And really what our mission is as Fairfax Dems is to see Democrats elected all throughout the Commonwealth. And so we're going to be doing a lot of work in the 10th Congressional District after they choose their nominee to make sure that stays blue. Jennifer Wexton will be leaving, so that's going to be a really hard-fought battle. But we also recognize as FCDC that Fairfax County is the turnout engine of the Commonwealth. For every blue ballot that we have cast in Fairfax County, we're canceling out a red ballot down south, right? So we have a lot of work to do to not just win Fairfax County, because we know we'll win regardless. We have a lot of work to do to ensure that we are going to cancel out as many Republican votes down south as we possibly can. And so that means doing a lot of work to turn out every single Democrat in this election. But also we do a lot of efforts to help support candidates throughout the state. So we will definitely be looking at other congressional districts and talk about how can our leaders and our members fundraise to support those candidates? How can we organize canvas days of action for those candidates where we go canvas or phone bank or anything that they need? That's definitely a part of what we do as Fairfax Democrats.
I know that there's like individual organizations that like bus Democrats down to some of the more swing areas throughout the state, because we are like a blue haven up here in Northern Virginia. So does FCDC really get involved in like helping those candidates outside of Northern Virginia?
We have. So last year, something that we did that was really recognized by a lot of candidates throughout the state was Brian Graham, who you mentioned earlier, my former boss. He actually came up with a program called Adopt a Dem, which I believe we're looking to bring back this year. But basically it was, on our Fairfax Dems website, which your viewers can go see if they'd like, we would post about candidates, and we had a random generator that would generate a candidate and then ask you to donate to them or ask you to go canvass. A lot of our district committees also organize canvasses to go to different areas. I know that, Franconia, for example, it's in magisterial district in Fairfax County, they organized to go support Josh Cole, when he was running in a very competitive race down south. And
what was he running for?
He was running for state delegate.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was one of the most competitive races in the Commonwealth, and we won it. We won as Democrats. So, and no small part to the Democrats in Fairfax County who traveled down there to, ensure that they could knock as many doors as humanly possible.
And I know that we just had Democrats had a slim majority in the Senate. How many seats did we flip in the House? And I know we have a majority there now.
So I can't remember the exact number, but I believe it was 3 seats that we flipped, and now we have a majority of 1.
Oh my gosh.
So every single vote matters.
Yeah, you guys, all that effort I think really paid off for 1 seat to make the difference. I want to talk to you more about that when we get back from the break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after a short break with more discussion with our guest.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things.
2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks.
Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh, no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school.
Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90. 180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mary Barthelson. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah.
I'd like to, we were touching on a little bit about the elections, but I'd like to recap maybe some of the new elected officials that got in the last cycle at the local level.
Yeah, well, last year we elected so many outstanding public servants. You know, they're not just elected officials because they do such an amazing job at leading our county forward. One person who I always love to talk about is Chris Falcon. Chris Falcon was elected the clerk of the court last year in 2023. And Chris, fun fact, took out the last remaining county-wide Republican in Fairfax County, which, you know, is an outstanding record to have and great way to be a part of history. But anyway, Chris has done a really amazing work. You know, he's very dedicated to making sure that our red flag laws are enacted properly, which the clerk of court has, you know, some role in participating in. He's done a great job of, you know, working to make the courts accessible to everyone. I know one thing that he was working on was actually making it so you didn't have to pay for parking if you're showing up for court, if you're required to come to court. And also a shout out to his new satellite location that he's opened in Fairfax County. I don't recall where exactly it's at.
I think it's actually in Reston.
Reston.
So it's in my district. I think I have a little bit of information about it. It's actually going to be tomorrow, and it's at the Kathy Hudgens Center from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And they have some services. They're issuing marriage licenses, I think certified copies, and one other thing. But it's 9 to 12, and then if you miss it, they're going to be bringing it back monthly. So I know that was something that he talked about, so I was really happy to see it like actually come to fruition.
Well, and I will just say, just imagine this. If he can do that in a handful of months of being an elected official, because he was sworn in January, just imagine what he's going to do throughout his 8-year term, which is ridiculously long. But
yeah, so I really appreciate Chris Falcon's work as clerk of the court, and I am looking forward to see what he does more. So who else won? Well,
I also want to highlight our school board members, because last year we had a heavy turnover from the school board. We had, of the 12 members on the school board, 8 of them retired. So the majority of our school board is newly elected, and they've just recently started their terms. I think about, you know, amazing elected officials that we have, like Kyle McDaniel, who I know that he's doing a lot of great work to ensure that students get free and reduced school lunches if they need it, to make sure that students are being fed, which I think we should probably all agree with. You know, we also have awesome members like Melanie Marin, who's done so much work on so many variety of topics, who's also from, I believe, your district. So we have great people at the school board, we have great people at the county-wide level, and we have great board of supervisors who are working day in, day out to continue protecting union rights for public employees, who are focused on providing affordable housing, and, you know, so much more that is needed to move Fairfax County further. So I'm so proud of all of the work that our elected officials have done, you know, newly elected and returning, you know, who all started in 2023.
And we just had a legislative session as well. So can you recap some of the highlights on maybe some of our new elected officials or like hot topics that would be good to mention?
Yeah, I think it is really, really important for us to highlight that this year, Democrats took back control of the State House and of the State Senate. And that is really, really important as we work to check the Youngkin agenda, which is way too radical for a place like Virginia. So Democrats have been hard at work in the latest session, passing a budget that reflects our values as Virginians, on working to make sure that marriage equality is a part of our Constitution and legalized in the state of, or in the Commonwealth of Virginia, working to ensure that abortion rights are upheld. We are the only state in the South right now that has access to abortion. So our Democratic legislators have done such an amazing job. You know, I like to highlight State Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy because she has been at the forefront of protecting abortion rights here in the state of, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I, also like to, point out our other legislators like Saddam Salim, who recently ousted Chap Peterson. And he has done amazing work, especially on education. So, delegate-wise, we have great people like Laura Jane Cohen, who, was one of the school board members who left and has joined the state assembly and has done amazing, amazing work for students with disabilities. So ultimately, Democrats are the ones getting it done at a state level. And we have to work very, very hard next year when we go to re-elect the governor, or to elect a new governor, to ensure that we hold on to the House of Delegates and we can actually start moving further once we get rid of Glenn Youngkin and his radical Republican Party.
You mentioned school board members becoming delegates, so I wanted to give a shout out to Karen Keys-Gamarra because she went from the school board and she took a delegate plum seat now that he's retired, and she got a bill passed that ended child marriage in Virginia, and I believe that's
right.
Another first in the South. So we're the only state protecting abortion, and now we're the only state in the South that is banning child marriage. So I think that was one that was a really great success. And then we also have Stella Pekarsky, who is on the school board, and now she's in the Senate. So yeah, you mentioned the gubernatorial race coming up. So I know that we had a primary, but now there's some news that you want to share that?
So there was a primary scheduled between Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger and Richmond Mayor LeVar Stoney. And we recently learned that LeVar Stoney will be dropping out of the governor's race to run for lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth. So now Abigail Spanberger will be our presumptive nominee. So we are so excited as a party to get behind Abigail. She has such a strong track record of leadership throughout the Commonwealth. Personally, I can't imagine someone else doing a better job than Abigail. And with her at the top of the ticket, we are absolutely going to take back the governor's mansion in 2025, which is a very, very strong goal for Fairfax County Democratic Committee. And I also would like to give a shameless plug that she is going to be speaking at our Blue Fairfax dinner in June.
Yeah, so that's good to hear that we've got a strong candidate. I feel like the last cycle, Republicans nationwide were really looking at Virginia as kind of their example state and trying to figure out what works to use in other states throughout the country. And they came up with CRT and crime. And do you think that they've got something cooked up that they're gonna use this time around? Do you think there's still gonna be the national spotlight on Virginia like last time?
Well, I think that we learned in 2023 that Republicans are really failing at messaging in the Commonwealth right now. I look at a lot of the ads that were played in battleground parts of the state during the closing month of the campaign in 2023. They focused around abortion. Youngkin had this grand vision that he would be able to redefine the conversation around abortion and try to make Democrats look radical on the issues and, distract from the fact that they have radical positions nationwide and also here in Virginia. So I think that if Republicans nationwide are looking at Virginia as a way to message or to win the messaging war against Democrats, I really think they should look elsewhere, because I don't think they'll find the answer here with Youngkin.
Yeah, Virginia, I feel like we've kind of done our own thing. Yeah, they did not have the red wave they were expecting and maybe excited for after Youngkin's victory. It seemed to fizzle out a little bit. Do you think that the presidential election coming up might affect Virginia at all?
Well, it's going to be a hard fight. You know, every single race you cannot take for granted. But I know that I've been talking with the Biden campaign, you know, in the last few weeks, and they are fired up. They know how important it is to run a strong campaign here in Virginia. And, you know, the Fairfax County Democratic Committee looks forward to working with them, because ultimately what this election will come down to is, what can we do in Fairfax County to turn out every single Democrat? So we're canceling out red ballots down south. So there will be a lot of work to do. We can't take this election for granted, and I think that we heard that from Gerry and from, you know, Biden himself. And so, but at the end of the day, I have no doubt that we will re-elect President Biden.
So aside from getting out to vote, what can our audience do to support the work of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee and Democrats throughout the state?
Yeah, the two biggest ways that you can help Democratic candidates this year is with your time and with your money. So it takes a lot of money to run. It takes a lot of money to run a race anywhere, let alone Virginia, where, you know, big corporations like to come in and spend untold amounts of money to shape elections the way that they want them shaped. So, you know, first I would tell you to go look at candidates who are running now and who are running in the general election, and, you know, see who you support and, you know, donate. But then also, we have to, elections aren't won by, you know, just raising money and sitting inside our homes or anything of that nature. They're won when we get out, when we talk to voters, when we make sure voters know where to vote, that they know how to vote, when to vote. So it takes a lot of work. It takes a village, right? So we really, if you want to make sure that Democrats win this year, you really have to get out. You have to knock some doors for candidates who you support. You have to write the postcards and get to work.
Thank you so much for, you know, giving us a recap of everything that's going on. I feel like every election feels like the most important one, but I'm going to tell everyone get out and vote, because this one is really important. So thank you to our audience for joining us, and come back next week for another guest on Inside Scoop.